I'm going to introduce you to a fantastic group now for our sort of wider group discussion. So why don't we invite them all to join us on screen, and I'll introduce them to you. Yes, I can see everybody. Good morning, everybody. Now, we don't really wave on Newsnight, but we do on Zoom. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me tell you who we've got. Izzy Obeng, yes, she got a mention earlier, is an entrepreneur. She's the founder of Foundivine, and I'm delighted to see here, Izzy, that you're also an alumna of Young Enterprise. You went through the program.
I did. I went through the program in secondary school.
Excellent. How was it?
We were never going to be on Dragon's Den one day, but we did give it a good go.
Thank you. Well, joining us in the bottom left, in case it's mirrored, it is bottom left of the screen, is the Right Honourable Justine Greening, who is the former Secretary of State for Education. She's the founder of the Social Mobility Pledge and also of the Levelling Up Goals. Good morning, Justine. How are you?
I'm very well, Ollie. Delighted to be here. I thought Sarah was brilliant.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just remind us on that Social Mobility Pledge, just very briefly, what is that?
It's encouraging businesses to get into schools, just as Sarah said, talk about opportunities, to open their doors for work experience so that you can really get a taste. And then thirdly, it's asking them to really look at their recruitment. So they don't maybe just go to the same places they always have done for their talent. They think much more broadly. And just delighted to be part of the event today, because I think companies can play a massive role on extending opportunity. And what we're talking about today is actually, if you can be an entrepreneur, you're not just able to create an opportunity for yourself, you can create maybe lots for other people.
Yeah, completely agree. Right now, in the middle of your screen, at the bottom, it's like Celebrity Squares. It really is Irene Dorner, who has had a formidable career. And Irene, in your full-time career, you were a hugely powerful executive in the banking industry. In fact, you led HSBC out of North America. Have I got that right?
Yes, you have, and I was completely struck by Sarah, because I once gave a speech called From Middlesbrough to Manhattan, and I thought, my goodness me, if the kids from a council house in Middlesbrough can get this far, then there's hope for everybody.
Fantastic. Well, I want your reflections, particularly on how maybe larger businesses can support that next generation. So thank you. That's Irene Dorner. By no means least, Russell Hobby is the Chief Executive of Teach First. You're in the business of building a fairer education for all. Just remind us how Teach First does that.
Yes, we want to make sure that every young person gets the start in life at school that they need to go on to do the things they want to do. We try and find the most talented people in our country and encourage them to become teachers. If we don't start there, we're not laying the foundations.
I want to ask you first about whether, or why perhaps, but certainly whether now is a good time to start a business. But to help us get into that, Justine, you've been Secretary of State for Education, you've been Secretary of State for International Development. Can you share a little bit of what you've seen of the economic impact of female entrepreneurs, not just in Britain, but around the world?
I did some work with the United Nations on this, and it's one of the biggest things that can rebuild our global economy. You know, if you're a country and half of your population is locked out from playing a full role, then you're not going to succeed. And that's why this matters so much. It's not just about individuals having opportunity, it's about the wider impact they can have when that happens.
Yeah, it's an unbelievably good place to start in terms of setting that scene. Izzy, you're one of our entrepreneurs joining us today. Just remind us about Foundivine and why you started it, because to Justine's point, this is a global business already, and you are seizing opportunity.
Absolutely. So Foundivine, so we set up 3 years ago in response to what we saw as a lack of inclusion within industry and within the startup ecosystem, but also a barrier for many young people, particularly women and those from other underrepresented groups, in just gaining access to entrepreneurship. I was pretty sick and tired of going to startup events and being the only one that looks like me, and often one of very few women. And we set up to literally change the face of entrepreneurship in the UK. That was the sort of mission at the time. And since then, we've been running programs across the UK designed to get more founders into entrepreneurship and help them scale.
Yeah, so my question to you, and to speak to the audience on this, Izzy, is now a good time to start a business? And if so, why?
Now is a good time to start a business if we let it be. And so what I mean by that is that the pandemic and everything that's happened over the last year has given us an opportunity to reset and think really critically about the way that we run businesses, the way that we support young people, the way business supports communities around it. I think that in this time that we're in, with anyone with a laptop anywhere in the world can start a business. There should be no social or economic barriers to starting up. And so it's a great time to start a business. You have access to all this free support, education, training, skills. We just need to signpost to them as effectively as possible to help more young people find it.
Excellent. And what do you say to that question, Sarah? Are you as encouraging as Izzy? Are you sounding a cautionary note? Because we can surround ourselves by naysayers, and some of them might have a very good point.
In the UK, especially, the furlough scheme have given people that security blanket to be able to know they can pay their mortgage, but maybe start the business that they've always wanted to. And so many people have turned that craft hobby into a business. And the nation is in a place where they want to support other small businesses. So I personally think there has never, ever been a better time to just take the bull by the horns and go get it, while there's so much support, as Izzy said, but also the mood of the nation is very much in a place to support and champion the success of small businesses.
I'm wildly excited when I hear entrepreneurs speak, because big business is a lot slower. We're a little bit more tramply on the small things sometimes, and it's great to hear some people who are get up and go, and you get a lot of people like that in big business, frankly, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are. What's our role? Well, I'm hearing confidence, and I can tell you that where I come from, if we put out a job application within a large organization, and it's got the skill sets that you require, well, I can tell you what women will do. They will take a look at that job application and they'll say, oh my goodness, I've only got 80% of that. I must go and find the other 20% before I can apply. A guy might be the other way around, 20/80, he'll apply and say, I'll find the rest and I'll be fine. And he'll wing it. Somehow, the larger organizations and everybody has got to show women that you have to take you have to view a risk as an opportunity and take it. What's the worst thing that can happen? It might not go quite right.
When it comes to entrepreneurship, being able to, blow your own trumpet is one of the most important skills you have. You might call it storytelling or, sort of sharing your story in different ways, but it's so important, particularly in the beginning, that you are able to be your biggest champion. I think a lot of young women get told that in order to be kind of socially attractive, you have to be modest and demure, and you're not allowed to sort of brag or shout about it. And I hate that notion. I think that we should have more women bragging all the time. And so that kind of self-confidence and ability to sell yourself is so important. And building networks is a huge part of that. Getting in the room, talking to the right people and making the impact you need to shift the dial on your business.
I always wanted to start my own business, but I never knew anyone who ran a business, let alone anyone who'd started one from scratch. And so it was so far away from my frame of reference growing up that I kind of just moved on to university and got on with my career. And I think it really matters to have advice, and as Sarah said, normalizing starting a business from a very, very early age. You do that, I think, with really credible people. So it's got to be the business community stepping forward saying, we're going to get into schools. And I think at some stage, Russell's right, teachers are under loads of pressure. So at some stage, we probably do need to find that time in the school day.
Thank you, Justine, and kudos to all of those organisations who bridge that gap, the Careers and Enterprise Company, Speakers for Schools, Founders for Schools. So many good opportunities there. Irene, I just wonder what role collaboration plays in building this sort of ecosystem that we want to see emerge. And particularly, I just wonder if you've got any examples of good organisations working together.
Yeah, I do. And collaboration to me is absolutely vital. And there's a reason for this, because I think we just get this wrong. We define people by jobs rather than by skills and competencies and by leadership and so on. Leadership, skills and competencies are the same. You need the same skills. So what have I seen that works? Well, first of all, I've seen it work inside organizations, but I've also seen it when you, for example, and I would encourage anybody to do this because I've done it myself, cross-industry mentoring. Find 5 companies find a senior person in that company, get them to put themselves up as a mentor, put forward one senior woman within their, or anybody within their company, and swap, just swap. And I can tell you, it works like a dream. When I was the CEO of HSBC in Malaysia, I actually did it. And it was, honestly, it took off just like a train.
Yeah, what a brilliant idea. I want to move on to this thought around role models. We've touched on it so far, but I don't want to leave networks, Sarah, without saying, what do you say to the individual that's tuned into this, or that knows somebody tuned into this, who says, look, this is all very well and I will try and work on my confidence, but I just don't have the connections. I don't have the contacts. Where do I start?
Yep, it's in your control to get them. If I can, I'll just give you an experience of me. So when I first started the business, I wanted to get my enveloper to take off in America. And pushing myself out of the comfort zone, I made the connections myself. And then I fostered those connections over the next couple of years, kept in touch with those people. You've got to push yourself to get out that comfort zone and go to where these people are.
Excellent advice, hugely empowering. Thank you, Sarah. You might have heard the excellent Enterprising Mindsets podcast from Young Enterprise. And one observation from that is that 90% of the guests so far have talked about the importance of relatable role models.
I've had role models who have been men as well as women. My grandma was a really big role model for me in my life as the matriarch of our family, but not that she inspired me in my business career, but she inspired me to become the woman I am and have the empathy that I do. So I think don't be closed-minded. Look for role models in many cross sections of your life.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful message. Let's talk a little more broadly about Izzy. Let's talk about mentors. I mean, you've talked about organisations needing to create and hold more spaces for mentoring and sort of increase capacity for mentorship. So let's get practical. How do we do this?
It's a fantastic thing, mentoring, and so much of what Sarah said resonated in that when you are starting out, being able to be quite assertive, maybe a little bit pushy sometimes when it comes to meeting people, respecting that they're very busy and, you know, you will prevail if you keep trying is so important. But where you don't necessarily have an understanding of that context or, you know, the knowledge of how to be in those environments, it's within our gift as industry, as businesses, to create environments that facilitate networking. And many of the panelists have talked about what they do within their respective organizations. And there's something there around ensuring that one, it's not just women talking to women. The number of times I've been kind of referred to a really senior male manager or leader, and they've kind of tried to signpost me to a woman who might be more appropriate because they didn't know if that would be their place. And I think there's an important place for allyship, as we've already talked about. So senior leaders recognizing the importance, and I think largely speaking we do, and making sure right through down to sort of middle management level, managers understand the importance of mentoring and supporting their junior employees, particularly if they come from less represented backgrounds, and actually creating spaces. If you're at a round table or you're at a dinner or you're in a room, you realize it's full of men. What are you doing to create a seat at the table for a woman who could be promoted into a more senior role? What are you doing to provide stretch opportunities for women in your team to go into those roles? What are you doing to support young people who might be coming in on a grad scheme or who might be coming on in an internship to gain more experience beyond the level they're at now? I think we all have individual responsibilities and shouldn't necessarily rely so much on our organizations to put those structures in place.
Yeah, and speaking of those organizations and structures, I'm just wondering, Irene, for the organizations that you chair, I just wonder what role sort of organizational culture plays in sort of creating that environment that really fosters that capacity for mentorship. I mean, how have you seen it? What's it like in practice? How do we increase that?
So culture trumps everything, okay? So I've been thinking about this, and I think that it all comes from the leadership for sure, but the point about companies, and in my experience, and it's a board responsibility, so I ask constantly on the board, that's what the chairman does, what are we doing? Where's our talent and succession? Where are we investing? What, you know, have we fallen behind? Where do we need to bring people on? What are the training courses we need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a board responsibility, but it occurred to me in answering this, if a company can get this right inside, then it will automatically start thinking about outreach to the outside. That's why it's so crucial to get the culture right within the organization for mentorship. And the biggest uplift I have ever had in my career is when I was offered a serious mentor. I have loads of mentees, I have loads of mentors now, but the biggest lift in my career was when I was given a formal mentor. And the best piece of advice he gave me, and I'm going to tie it up to what everybody is saying, the best piece of advice, it was he gave me when he was trying to say to me, what do you want to do next? And they're trying to ask you, Irene. And I rambled on for ages. And then he said, I'm really bored with what you're saying. What you have to do, Irene, your boss is not telepathic. You have to ask. And I thought, oh, right. And I've told everybody that, and that's what everybody's saying this morning. All that can happen is somebody says no. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. Thank you, Irene. And fascinating to hear that to this day you have loads of mentors, somebody who's received Lifetime Achievement Awards. Yeah, that's a really powerful message. Thank you.
Ollie, I'm just going to say something. If you don't know what's possible, then you really don't know where to go. And mentors and networking show you what's possible.
Yeah. 100%. And I can see Justine nodding, because it is such an important part of this social mobility piece. I want to change the subject a little bit onto sort of confidence and self-belief. And you know, it's another huge area that impacts on women, and research has shown that it doesn't just impact on female founders, but women advancing in the workplace more generally. So I guess the question is, what can be done to address this? Justine, got a specific question come in for you. Alison Rose's review of female entrepreneurship proposed there to be a common set of educational materials focused on entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and self-belief. This was to be for both men and women, but we are aware that women especially can lack attributes like confidence and maybe more risk averse. So how can we tackle this, and why did the recent government white paper on skills, we know you're no longer in government, and jobs, not reflect the need for an entrepreneurial mindset and associated skills for those whose job could involve creating new businesses?
So I think it is a gap. And the reason it's a gap is that if you're going to do leveling up, which I passionately care about, and we were doing this at the DFE whilst I was there, then it's about not just developing your talent, it's having that talent able to connect up to opportunities. But, you know, that can come from inward investment. But sometimes the people most invested in creating opportunities in their local community are the people who are already there. And when I wanted to start a new business in Rotherham, it was because there were no jobs. And the reason I wanted to start a business, I thought it would be great to create some jobs for my community. But to do that, you have to have the skills. And so it's about giving young people the entire package. Of course, with COVID, everyone's gone online. And if you like, that digital divide becomes really important, but it's almost never been easier to start a business now. And therefore, actually, people can start to create the jobs locally, perhaps for themselves, in a way that they maybe never thought of before. And, you know, Sarah said, and Izzy's been really talking about as well, actually, now's a great time for people to think about doing it. So therefore, really having a much more structured approach in schools, and then outside, for people who are outside the education system, maybe adults, having them know where they can go get signposted for all of that advice that's there. That's a really quick way to start leveling up the economy. And it's a really quick way to start creating jobs for people who need them. So really, for me, it's the big gap that if you can have a massive push in entrepreneurship, now could be the time when we create thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of new companies that can be the growth businesses of the future. And you've got the tech industry, you've got the green economy. They're all brand new opportunities.
What about the policies that got away? If you knew that the Prime Minister would have said, that's genius, Justine, what's the one thing you would have loved to have pushed through, particularly in service of this morning's topic and agenda?
Well, it would have been this. So from my perspective, academics are one thing, they really matter, but there's a bigger thing out there around having the right rest of the skill set, problem solving, creativity, all of that, but then having the experiences that really bring that alive and make it real and help you connect up what you're learning at school to the real world. So I would have found time in the school day for that to happen, because for a lot of young people from better privileged backgrounds, if I can call it that, that's what their parents are doing for them, and it's great. But there's a whole load of young people for whom that doesn't happen, and yet they're massively talented. So it's just such an untapped opportunity for us if we can manage to find that time within the education system to give them those sorts of contacts.
If larger organizations value entrepreneurial skills like resilience and agility, maybe creative thinking, to what extent do the organizations that you work with and see recruit with these skills and competencies in mind?
Well, they do, and I won't jump down your throat and say they're hopeless at it. But what happens in large organizations is large organizations run on consistency, and they run on bringing a whole load of people through the organization. They do look for agility, they do look for resilience, they are looking for people with drive and entrepreneurial skills. But to be perfectly honest, it's a great place to learn. It may not be a great place to stay. You can pick up an awful lot of skills in a large organization, and then you can lift and shift that out. So I have no issue, and in fact, I would recommend it if people are not really quite sure whether they got the great product or not. Start and learn some skills somewhere else and then take them outside.
Yeah. Can I ask a cheeky question, Irene? We're hearing about the sort of rise of the side hustle, someone starting a business alongside their day job. If you were patrolling the corridors of Rolls-Royce or Control Risks and someone sidled up to you and told you about their side hustle, would you sort of, would your heart sing? Would you be horrified?
People do the most extraordinary things and they have the most high energy. And I'm always saying to people, if you could bring all of that to work, we would be massively more productive. But what happens is people break out and use their talents all over the place. Absolutely not. If people are going to have a sideline, if they're going to drive a piece of business of their own, absolutely not. Most organizations, so long as it doesn't conflict, they will actually welcome it.
Russell, I worry, and it's not a criticism of your language, but the language that I've already used, embed enterprise in the current curriculum. What does that even mean? And what does it mean to you?
But I would say, there are some very old-fashioned skills that are going to become really useful. Numeracy and literacy, particularly if you're going into a digital business, are going to be hugely useful to you in all your guises. So we can take some of the existing subjects and we can look about how we present them to young people through a lens as well. And then I would also be thinking about careers advice and guidance in schools. When I go into a top private school, I see enormous amount of resources devoted to careers advice and guidance, and they don't really need it because they've got all the connections they need. I want to see that in every state school in the country as well, and making sure young people know what skills they'll need for the jobs they want.
What can schools do to help disadvantaged students to understand and reach their potential?
Connect them up with great companies like yours. Find the time to make sure they get that exposure and that experience. It will be transformational.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, Russell, let's just stay within the school environment briefly. You've spoken, Russell Hobby, about the need to distribute social capital more fairly. What do you think is the current direction of travel here? What more needs to be done, to put it bluntly?
I think we've stalled a little bit on this. We've been making some progress. And to be fair to everybody, the lockdown and the disruption to education through coronavirus has impacted on all of what we're doing. But the trouble is social capital is self-reinforcing. Those who already have a lot are always more resilient to crises and have the connections as well. So I actually see that more and more young people from disadvantaged backgrounds are leaving school with great grades, and they're still not getting into university. They're still not founding their organizations. They're still not being offered the jobs in the same way. And that's where the earlier points I think about the connections come in. And we can't leave it down to them. It has to be down to us on that, to look at our networks. Networks, unfortunately, work on existing connections, who we feel close to. They're self-reinforcing there. So we should all look at our network and say, how far are we reaching out to people who are not coming from the same backgrounds as us and forcing ourselves in that direction.
Yeah, got it. And so for you, Russell, where does role models, inspiration meet real world connections? This could be a thorny area. At what point does it become okay to forge those real world connections? Because a lot of organizations are quite confused about that at the moment.
Yeah, and we saw in the answers earlier that people were talking about mentors who were relevant to them or had similar paths to them as well. And I think that that's part of it. Sometimes we can find people who've been incredibly successful in their lives, and the young people are looking at it and saying, there's no connection there. I want to see people who've been through what I've been through there. And I don't think it's about lifting their ambitions up. I've never met a young person who didn't have high ambitions, but they often think that it's just not open to them. They don't see the path from A to B. So I think it's useful to bring people in who are earlier in their careers, who perhaps haven't had it quite as easy and has been successful, and that sees them how to get the first foot on the ladder. That's the crucial point. Once they're on the ladder, then everything else can start to come as well. So I think we need, relatable role models who come from the backgrounds of the young people who we often overlook.
What is the one thing that would make that difference? And we will show you the results. But just to be crystal clear for our panel here today, what is the one thing which would make a difference to unleashing the potential of future female founders in Gen Z? And I'm going to start actually with Sarah, and then I'll go to Irene, then Russell, please.
And I think we just need to instill confidence, instilling confidence from the start point, and then also looking at how we can build more role models in, exposing those young kids from a very young age to female role models or even male role models, but people that they can see, look up to as mentors, even if they're not, as we've said, the face-to-face mentors they get time with every day.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Now to all of our panel, forgive me, I'm going to ask for practically your tweet-sized thoughts on this as we go through. Irene, what's the one thing?
I'm going to build on that, and there's two, because Gen Z is such a wide age range. For the youngsters, there's some basics that we need to teach in schools. How does the system work? People come out of school, they've got no idea. We have a system, we can teach that bit. Secondly, we've got to mentor networks. They can't see what they don't know, and we've just got to help them see it.
Excellent. Russell.
Let's stop putting young people into boxes from such an early age about what they can and can't do and what jobs are and aren't open to them as well. And that really does start 5 years old in primary school, probably starts before then. Let's open it up.
Yeah, brilliant advice, a real rallying call. Thank you. Justine, what would be your one thing?
Sometimes when it feels like you're failing, that's the beginning of when you're really going to succeed big. You might think that the world's just fallen out, but actually, if you can think your way through how you're going to respond positively to that, that can be the moment when you really do grow and get things to the next level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's hit me really hard. I think that's such an important thing to say to any child in the world. Thank you. Thank you, Justine. Izzy.
Yes, just picking up on Justine's point, that resilience, because when you are running a business, you will feel like you're failing every day. The highs are very high and the lows are very low. So resilience is so important. But one thing I'd say is that the opportunities for young people need to be practical. It cannot be theoretical. I spent 18 months in the University of London. You can't read a book and figure a lot of these things out. We need to be putting young people in businesses. We need to be giving them the opportunity to run projects and build these enterprise skills and that mindset as well.
Yeah, totally agree. And there speaks a young enterprise alumna. That is excellent. Make it practical. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much to all of our panel as I wave them goodbye. Let's welcome back Sharon Davies, Chief Executive of Young Enterprise, to share her reflection. Sharon, what an extraordinary session.
Just absolutely, like you say, extraordinary. Great inspiration from Sarah. Think on your feet. I mean, we have to say, Gen Z, really socially aware, really brave generation, digital natives. So think on your feet, think where you can make real impact. Don't let your past define your future. I mean, that's just empowering words there. Izzy, now is a great time to start a business if you let it be. And I thought her words around storytelling were really, really powerful. Storytelling is important, that you have to be your biggest champion. And she linked that so powerfully to the role that self-confidence has and the role there that networks have. So if you haven't got that network, where do you go to get it? And Sarah then said, well, you've really got to step outside of your comfort zone. And for me, I felt the issues were really inextricably linked. And all of the panel talked about the importance of a network. And that view was supported by the poll of everybody else who was engaged with. The importance of building your personal network matters. And I think Irene made a really powerful point of the role that mentors had on her life, on her continued success, as did everybody else. And just in terms of how we help build confidence, so the importance of opportunities and support to make sense of those opportunities through support and mentoring. And I thought Justine put, a really great kind of global wrapper around the importance of creating experiences that bring knowledge to life. And her passion for creating, really connecting talent with opportunity is so inspiring. We have massively talented young people, massively talented young women, and we have to find ways of connecting those with opportunities. There are real opportunities, I think, ahead for us to apply learning, to help young people reflect on the learning, to transfer that learning, to really help them make sense of what they're learning and the relevance of that into their futures. So build that confidence. So, and I think, as Russell said, that's important when it comes to careers education and careers guidance. And finally, Sarah's words around confidence, they're all linked to enabling young women to think, well, why not me when it comes to building that business? We have to start early.